Hey, you guys, welcome back to EntreNetwork podcast. Today I'll be talking to Janelle Amos, who is a demand generation consultant. She just founded her business that's Elevate Growth. So with that, she focuses on demand generation for B2B SaaS companies. So we'll talk about her overall journey into entrepreneurship and how it's going. We'll also talk about demand generation, how you can implement it for small businesses as well as B2B SaaS companies. We talk about the difference between demand generation and lead generation. We even talk about TikTok and LinkedIn for content. So it's action-packed as far as the value added to the audience. And with that, of course, with entrepreneurship, we always look at the return on investment. So she also touches on when you can expect the return on investment for this overall strategy. So stay tuned. I know I learned a lot within this episode, so I hope you guys learned a lot as well.
Welcome to EntreNetwork, brought to you by Revision Marketing Group. This podcast is meant to serve as an entrepreneurial knowledge base of wisdom and practical tips in marketing, branding, and technology to help grow your business effectively.
So, that kind of goes into my entire background, so bear with me as I kind of explain the journey. I always had, aspirations of wanting to start my own demand firm, but I never really had the fire behind my shoes to do that. And it wasn't until the very last company that I was at, they were asking me to make a decision that I didn't feel that was morally or ethically appropriate. And I had a really hard time thinking about the decision, whether I should keep it or keep my job or whether I should resign. And essentially they gave me 30 days to decide to stay at the company or to disagree with it and to be discharged. And it was probably one of the most challenging decisions of my entire life. And I began asking people all around what they would do. I asked my family, I asked my friends, I asked my professional network, everybody who knew me in one sense of form or another, to try and gather objective opinions on what they would do and what they would advise me to do, given how well they know me. And, they gave me that 30 days to decide. And so the 2 weeks was going back and forth on trying to figure out what my stance was. The other 2 weeks was actually deciding that, okay, I'm not okay with this and I'm going to branch out and I'm going to move forward with it. And so really getting that fire behind my shoes of I can't fail and branching out, that's really what drove me to actually doing my own business and being an entrepreneur. So the fact of being challenged by a decision that I didn't feel comfortable with gave me an initiative to say, we need to do something different. We need to pivot.
Indeed. No, that's incredible that you was able to just jump into entrepreneurship like that. And you said your husband, he's an entrepreneur as well?
Yeah, he's had his own business for the last 10 years.
Okay, and he's been just kind of pushing you for the last couple of years to just kind of branch off and do your own thing, or?
So we always talk about having passive income and finding a way for us to grow in our own ways and then to have kind of the income just being as a roll up of the things that we like to do. And so he's like, you really like demand gen. Why don't you do a business with it and then bring in passive income, and that's that. And so he's always been having the business mindset. And so he's always wanted that for me.
Oh, that's incredible. So for our audience, so this podcast is us kind of talking, Janelle, kind of touching on demand generation, what it is and how it can benefit different businesses of all shapes and sizes pretty much. So for you, what is demand generation for people who don't know?
Yeah, so I actually love diving into that question. And think of lead gen as more transactional, and think of demand gen as building a following, building a brand. So with lead gen, it's the mindset of what can I get in to get something out, the direct one-to-one exchange. And demand gen, it's about going after the right people at the right time with the right pain points and the right solutions. So demand gen is about having the fact that it's okay to have a marketing campaign that doesn't one-to-one directly translate into lead results. It's the fact that it's interconnected into the larger marketing strategy. And I actually have a specific use case that I love to explain it with because I'm an avid shopper. So the way that I like to explain it is the fact that, you're going to the mall and say you want to buy one item like a scarf or a pair of shoes, but you're not exactly sure where to get that from. And you have two stores in mind, store A and store B. And so you make your way to the mall and you realize that store A and store B are on two opposite sides of the mall end, right? So you're on one end, you go into store A, you look around, you explore, you check things out, you look at prices. You're like, cool. I kind of get a better understanding of what I want, but I still really want to go look at store B just to see if they have any discounts or any new inventory, right? So you leave store A, you go on your journey on to store B, and anybody who's been in a mall knows that there's like these little kiosks that are in between like the middle of the mall walkways, right? And throughout your journey between store A and store B, you get hounded by like about 8 different persistent kiosk people. And they're trying to ask you if you want your hair straightened. They're trying to ask you if you want special lotion. They're trying to ask you to get your shoe shined, whatever, right? But they're talking to everybody and anybody, just trying to get anybody to focus on them, right? And all you want to do, you as a consumer, is say, no, thank you, appreciate it. No, thank you. I just want to get to store B. I just want to get to store B, because you already know what it is that you want, where you want to go, and what you're looking for, right? So the way that I explain demand gen versus lead gen is that demand is about having that brand recognition of the store A and store B to be already thought of like ahead of time when you're looking for your product. And lead gen is the background of like the persistent kiosk people who want to sell you something just to sell you something. They have no idea if you have money for it, if you have a need for it, if you care about it, nothing. They just need to make the sale. So they're doing everything in their power to just cold outreach, talk to anybody that's coming by within the hallway, and just hope that somebody steps in, anyone, right? And even if one person does stop, for the free lotion, for the hair straighten, the shoe shine, whatever it is, it's very unlikely that that person is going to want to buy every single product that you have on the shelf, all your different lotion variations, all your different, shoe shining products. And so when we translate that to a B2B SaaS model, it would be very difficult to sell your entire product suite by doing a lead gen approach of just having anybody, right, come through. You're interested in this one set of lotion, but we have all the other things, that you need to be thinking of as well. It was like, I'm only half sold on the lotion. No, thank you to the rest, right? So it creates that barrier and that challenge in the process in general, to where in demand gen, somebody's already walking into your store, right? They're already there. They're just looking. They're trying to find the right product for that. But even though that example is a little bit extreme, it's one of my favorites because I always think that it's true. I'll ask you, when was the last time you went to the mall and actually bought something from a kiosk?
Not in a while. I remember in Monroe, which is in Louisiana. It's in Louisiana, but I went to Monroe and this guy, he was trying to shine my shoes, and I was like, no, I'm good. I just want to go ahead and go to this place
Yeah,
right
I'm
over
good.
here. But no, that was a really
Yep.
good visualization of the difference between lead and demand generation. So for you, what's the do they have any kind of overlap, or do you have like a overall strategy for demand generation while also having lead generation, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the way that I like to position demand gen is that you have to think of it in a different lens. It is technically lead gen because you want to bring in quality people into your store, right? You want to have the traffic into your store. Nobody's saying that that's wrong or you shouldn't be doing that, or you need to be pivoting away from that. The thing that demand generation takes into consideration is understanding that because one person walks into a store, it's not going to be a one-to-one sale. That person could not live in that area and they could go to another location and buy from the same store somewhere else, right? So it's about analyzing the marketing initiatives as a whole. So it technically, I guess, is lead gen, but you're understanding your audience better. You're understanding the placements of your products better. You're understanding the promotional efforts, where these audiences are, and where you want to be in front of. So it's essentially lead gen, but with a quality lens over top of it to attract the right prospects at the right time that are actually interested in your product.
So pretty much, basically meeting the person where they are in the overall buyer journey, instead of treating everybody the same and trying to get a lead in to be that one transaction kind of thing.
Yeah, but it's also very difficult to find somebody, like, to meet them where they are. Like, how do you know, how can you measure, how can you analyze, how can you annotate where somebody is in the journey? So it's also making sure that as somebody is beginning that journey, where are those journeys being taken place? That's where you want to be. Because once somebody's entered the buyer's journey, like they had their decision made, right? Like we're going to store A and we're going to store B. What are the components that are behind somebody making a decision on why they want the product that they want, why they're considering store A and store B? That's where we want to be a part of from a demand standpoint.
Okay. And as far as SaaS, your overall background in demand generation, what other industry does that kind of translate to? Or is it just industry wide?
So I think demand generation can be translated to any business, honestly. If you're wanting to bring more quality, if you want to bring higher quality prospects to your business to buy whatever product you're selling or any type of service that you're selling, the go-to-market strategy behind that should still essentially be the same. You still want to attract the right quality people, right? You still want to attract those that are probably going to be long-term customers with you, and they're not going to have a high churn rate. And so I don't think it's specific to directly SaaS. I think anybody as a business owner, as a profitable business, they need to be understanding where their audience is and meeting them to what makes sense in their industry and their product suite.
Awesome. So as far as like resources that you can use to do demand generation, what would they be just in your overall history of SaaS startups and things like that?
Yeah, I'd say start with hiring a demand expert, somebody who has actually done it before and understands your market and your audience. I think a lot of people want to translate industries to industries directly one-to-one, same as they want to have the output within lead gen. But I think the difference to that is demand gen is understanding your audience. So without having the learning curve of who this audience is, I think it's having, that expert in-house that can go in and understand your audience at scale to then put in those campaigns in place.
Okay, so for businesses that are more traditional where they haven't done any kind of demand generation and it's basically just sales driven, how can you actually pivot a company like that to be more focused on demand generation?
Yeah, those are really hard questions to have and conversations to have internally. But essentially, the pivoting starts from the top down. If they're finding that the sales cycle is taking too long, if they're finding that they're not hitting the revenue goal, if they're ready to start making a change, leadership has to have the eye-opening coming to Jesus moment that they're ready for a business change. Because demand generation isn't just one person, it's an entire company alignment, right? And so you can't just hire one demand person and say, we're going to fix all the revenue problems. Like demand generation is so dependent on other people as well. And so having the buy-in from leadership, having the support from leadership, the resources from leadership, that's going to be the best start up. And so having those conversations with the leadership team is talking about the business outcomes. It's talking about, hey, you want to do this at scale, you want to grow at a faster rate, you want to, the things that actually matter to them are money and it's timelines. And so having the conversations on if you want to drive more money, if you want to have your compound annual growth rate from X to X, in such amount of time frame, these are the strategies that need to be in place in order for you to achieve that.
So for smaller businesses, such as a mom and pop shop here in Shreveport that's like 4 or 5 employees, how can they benefit from demand generation?
I think it's the same way, understanding where your audience is, and whatever method of channels that are needed to attract whatever mom and pop. If it's just kind of word of mouth, then it's going back into the community and having the key conversations with the community, the mom and pop stores. Most of them it's, hey, I know such and such, you know such and such, you know such and such. How can you be a part of those such and such conversations?
No, that's really good. Go then. So with that, one can well, of course, it's different for business to business, but as far as like the return on investment for demand generation, is it kind of give us insight into what that looks like?
Yeah, so my background is B2B SaaS, so bear with me because that's the majority of my experience. Um, but I get the question often on how quickly can we see the return on this new strategy change and this new strategy pivot. And the long answer to that is depending on how long your sales cycle is. A lot of enterprise B2B SaaS can be upwards of like 6 to 9 months. So at a minimum, you have to give it at least 1 year to really fully analyze if it's working or not. But what I like to say as we're leading up to these conversations with leadership is to start looking at the metrics that matter, right? Like, let's start looking at the pipeline acceleration. Let's start looking at how fast the sales cycles are moving for. If you're getting an increase in website conversions, are they the right conversions? Are they more demo requests? Are those demo requests turning into opportunities faster? Are those opportunities associating with a higher dollar amount than we've been seeing prior? Those are the little nuggets you measure and you showcase throughout the journey. Then at the end of the year or the 2-year evaluation period, you can say, hey, we invested X amount of marketing dollars. This is the amount that we're seeing in terms of like the overall investment to the ROI, right? The return of what we're analyzing and we're trying to figure out. And we were establishing the breadcrumbs throughout to keep the support and to keep the enthusiasm, to where after, when we were actually successful with the demand generation strategy, we can say, boom, this is how we did that. Thank you for your trust. Thank you for your confidence. This is how we're going to position us going forward.
Wow. So I am I'm extremely new to like B2B SaaS, but it's extremely interesting to get more insight into it. So as far as like leadership, what's the biggest pushback that you receive from leadership as far as implementing this new strategy?
Yeah, so if they've been doing like a sales-led motion or a lead gen motion, the biggest conversation is that they can't actually measure it. They're stuck in the mindset of the transactional mindset, having to put one thing in and get one thing out. And so that's the biggest roadblock, that's the biggest challenge. And to just come in and say, hey, trust me, that doesn't always work with leadership, right? Like I mentioned, to have the conversations, they have to be open to that change. They have to be privy to the fact that whatever we're looking to change, whether it's the increase in revenue, like there has to be a problem associated with it, to where they can then cognitively go and say, okay, now I'm ready to invest X and trust you and see that return. Because without that, demand generation, it can't happen. If you're constantly measured on the one-to-one, there's no way, there's way too many frictions that's going to stand in place to really showcase that value.
Mm. So what companies have you seen in your history implementing this new strategy, or that's not afraid of the new strategy?
Yeah, so Chris Walker with Refine Labs, he's like the leading industry marketing influencer talking about demand gen, the conversations to have with leadership, how to actually go about that. He's built his business on that same strategy and that same approach. So if anybody wants to look at the how to do this, where to go to, like, he's kind of that goat. But I will also say one of the last companies that I was at as well, they're called Recourses. And leadership from the top down, they were on board. When I was joining and I was talking to them about it, they were like, we get it. Demand generation takes time. We get it. You need these resources. And so we were having those quality conversations that was very refreshing for me. And so those are just a couple of companies that get it, that have been doing it, that aren't afraid to tackle the market and to be something different.
Wow. So for you and all of this expertise and knowledge that you have in demand generation, how have you been able to benefit from that while going into full-time into your own business?
Yeah, no, I love that question too, because a lot of things that I've been writing about on LinkedIn have been like, don't just walk the walk, or don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. I said that backwards. And one of the biggest controversies on LinkedIn is TikTok. Right. And so everybody's like, should businesses be on TikTok? Should you be on TikTok from like a professional stance? Is it just all things personal? And, there's just been a lot of talk on whether it fits within the B2B world. And so I was talking about, being first to market and, not just being perfect and getting something out there and testing and figuring it out and like learning for yourself. And so I challenged myself and said, like, I can't just talk the talk. I have to walk the walk too. So I put myself on TikTok and I've been documenting my whole journey to consulting series. I've been trying to blog about it. So anybody else who is interested in consulting or is put in a similar situation to me and they have to make that pivot quickly, here are some items, right, that you can think of that I've learned along the way that potentially you can learn to not, you don't have to learn as hard of a lesson as I did, I should say. And so because that's been my top performing content, I translated that to TikTok. And the consistency of the impressions, the reach, it's been absolutely crazy. And so the fact that with just a little test, I've been able to see the results from TikTok from a professional standpoint and challenging myself to say, we need to try something new and using that demand generation mindset. Like, where is my audience at? Where are these marketers at, right? So really challenging myself in my own business on my marketing strategy to win more customers. It was one of the things that I had to take to market myself.
Oh, wow. So TikTok, so funny enough, we have been discussing TikTok a lot within these past 2 or 3 months here at Revision to see is this a strategy or is this a platform that we can actually get on and it makes sense because we create a lot
Yeah.
of content such as well video content which is going to be really good for TikTok, but we've been pushing it on different channels that we know, like, and trust. So there's some risks involved with like just TikTok overall, and trying to see if it's worth it. So I'm super interested in subscribing to the content that you're creating where I don't have to repeat some of the errors that you made. No, that. But with that, how do you feel about TikTok versus LinkedIn? Because I've been seeing a lot of content from you on LinkedIn.
So I don't think the mindset of versus one versus the other should be, the conversation. I think it should be how can we be on those, right? So again, understanding where your audience is. For me, I go after marketers, right? I want to work with marketing teams and marketing leaders with my business. Where are those marketers at? They're on LinkedIn. Like, it would be a no-brainer for me not to consider LinkedIn with the business network, the capabilities, the connecting, the networking, all of that. It's a no-brainer, right? But it's also taking the fact that us us individuals are being challenged by the B2C world with like Amazon and Instacart and DoorDash with the instant gratification and the tailoredness and everything that's me, now. You have to translate that mentality to the person as well. Like, as much as we're speaking to businesses, we're speaking to a person behind a business name. So what makes that person them? Where are they consuming their content? What do they do after work hours? TikTok is one of those, especially for me. I'm in bed late at night and I'm scrolling through my TikTok videos, right? Like, I'm not on it on like my 9 to 5 because I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on, my company website, I'm working on my strategies. But after hours, me as a person, where do I consume that content? So I don't think it's too much as one versus the other. I think it's understanding your best performing pieces of content and finding ways to translate that with how each platform likes their content and produces their content and distributes their content. So, a great example is my Journey to Consulting series on LinkedIn. That's a blog. That's just me writing. On TikTok, that's me behind a video talking about it, right? And it's sometimes shortening it, sometimes it's going into it, showing my personality. I'm not just like reading a script behind it. It's taken into consideration that shorter videos are better than longer videos. TikTok caps you. I think they have like a 15-second, 30 or 60-second, and like a 3-minute one, right? So if my blog is going on for 10 pages, what are the smart snippets that I can take from that for my TikTok video? So
Wow. No, that definitely works because it's also repurposing the content and meeting well, not
yep,
meeting them where they are, but pretty much looking at LinkedIn and seeing what performs well on that, and then adjusting to different platforms where it's not just a shotgun approach with everything looking and feeling the same. Of course, you can't do that on TikTok, but
exactly.
no, you're getting a lot more out of the content that you produce because if it's a 10-page blog, you already did a lot of the time to collect all of those thoughts and then type up that article. But how do you get more out of that? So no, that's an incredible strategy. Also, I want to touch on the overall target audience. So for lead generation versus demand generation, um, so you touched on like the overall understanding of the specific target audience. Is that a barrier for leadership to enter into demand generation because they have to know a little bit more about their overall target audience?
Potentially. So oftentimes it could go probably one of two ways. One, leadership is on point. This is who we're targeting and they're right. They're just not doing the go-to-market strategy correctly, right? So that's when you revise your go-to-market. Sometimes leadership is saying, hey, I only want to talk to CEOs. I only want to talk to CTOs. And you're limiting your audience that way. And so a demand generation strategy is saying that's great, But it's also highly unlikely that a CEO is going to be the one that's doing the research, that's reaching out, talking to the sales team, that's evaluating the different competitors, the pricing components, the fit within the team that they're wanting to integrate the product with. Who are the influencers? Who are those that the CEO has around him, the CTO has around them? Who are they talking to? What you want to do is be a part of the conversations that the CEOs have, and you want to be visible to those that they're going to be talking to. So a great example is CEOs like to go golfing, right? So on weekends, you'll catch them all on the golf course. So they'll be having the conversation of, oh, hey, I heard such and such is the new product to market. Have you tried it? Oh, yeah, I heard about it, or no, I haven't heard about it. What does it do? And those are the conversations that they're going to be having on the golf course. And then when they get back on Monday morning, they're going to go to, I don't know, like the VP of marketing, and they're going to say, hey, such and such, I had this great conversation with, Frank over at whatever company name, and they just saw this new product. Have you heard of it? And the VP is going to be like, oh yeah, oh my God, like I just read this article about it, or like I just saw, this webinar or whatever piece of content on LinkedIn about it. So the brand awareness is there. And then the CEO is going to be like, oh, cool. Can you look more into that? I'd really like to learn more about how that can fit to our company. So the VP goes to her director, the director does the research, or the manager does the research, or whatever level of the team structure that it is. And then they go to the website, they submit the demo form, they talk to sales, they do their, competitor analysis, they do all the, the due diligence that's needed, and they ultimately buy the product. So what were the influencers? The fact that the influencer to the CEO knew about it via the content that was on LinkedIn, the webinars, right? And that the C-level was talking about it based on where they are, the golf courses, after hours, like happy hours, right? Those are the demand strategies on understanding where your audience is, understanding how to have the right message at the right time, right? And then also having just a solid product that could actually win a deal. I think that should be something to start with, right? Like actually being good enough to buy.
Wow. So, with the overall product, where does the handoff end for demand generation? Is it pretty much the same as lead generation, where you have this person and then they come to the website, they fill out the demo, and pretty much the company takes on after that?
That's a really great question, and also a great differentiator between lead gen and demand gen. Lead gen, to your point, is very transactional. They did the conversion point that I wanted to. Wipe my hands clean. They're in the sales hands. Sales doesn't close them. They're pointing fingers at each other. You're driving quality leads. You don't know how to close deals, and you're just getting that friction between the two teams. Demand gen is talking about the overall customer experience. It's talking about, even though they submitted that website like demo form, are they still talking to a sales team? What's that follow-up time? What does that process look like? If they submitted a demo form, are they going to an SDR who's going to ask them 15 checklists of discoveries? They're not actually getting a demo if they're requesting a demo. Like, those are the friction points in the customer journey. So demand generation is very much taking everything in consideration, from like starting point to ending point, because the end goal is to have stronger lifetime value rates. It's to have customer relationships for life. It's to grow the revenue as high as possible with as less of churn as possible, and obviously like with the highest amount of opportunity deals too, right? And so analyzing any points of friction, any points of why somebody wouldn't buy, or the frustration behind it. And I always like to model what B2C companies are doing, because they get it, and we're the ones that are spoiled by it. And B2B makes so many excuses, like, oh well, we can't because X, we can't do that because X. And it's like, but have you even tried it, right? It's having that, considering something different mindset. So I think that's another great example between lead gen and demand gen.
Awesome. So I think the last thing is just leaving the audience with a last piece of advice to get into demand generation, or get or jump out of lead, or transition away from just heavy sales focus, and slowly jump into demand generation.
I think a great first step is to analyze your journey yourself, your company journey yourself, right? Take off your marketing lenses, like really take them off, because it's really hard to do, and go through the process yourself. Like, have you submitted a demo request form? What does that process look like? Do you get a thank you message? Do you get a calendar booking link? Do you get an email follow-up? What does that process look like? Are you okay with that? Are you frustrated by it? Where could you have learned more throughout the process? And that's a great place to start. And then compiling those thoughts and going to your leader, like a marketing team leader, and saying, hey, I just did this and I saw these results, and could we be doing this a little bit better? And come with both the problems and like some potential solutions, and just start opening the conversation that way. How can we be better at this? How can we be more focused on our customers? And if you start getting that buy-in, then we can start talking about the larger strategy on how we can make this from, an org-wide perspective instead of something that just marketing focuses.
So focusing specifically on the customer and their overall journey, instead of what's convenient for the overall organization, or kind of coming up with a solution that satisfies both, because without customers, you don't have a business. So
Exactly. Exactly.
Awesome. So where can people find you online and actually buy your services, because you're a founder and you're a demand generation consultant? So where can people reach you?
Yeah, so you can find me at LinkedIn at Janelle Amos, or you can go directly to my website, which is going to be elevate-growth.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the EntreNetwork podcast. I know I enjoyed it and learned a lot about just B2B SaaS companies, but also demand generation and the difference between that and lead generation. So it was extremely insightful for me, and I'm sure that it's going to be insightful for the audience as well.
Well, I appreciate that. No, thank you so much for the invitation. It was a super blast, brainstorming with you.
Of course.